Looks like Disney's Carnotaurs has made it to Goji Center. So let's go ahead and see what kind of chaos this monster has been unleashed.
Today, the alleged most dangerous island in Jurassic will be invaded by saurian horned killers. Debuting more than a quarter century ago in cinemas, we welcome back Disney's Carnotaur pair. The over
2 decades ago.
Against the monumental task of surviving, or perhaps taking over St. Hubert, the newest.
Yeah, those things were tough.
Island in the franchise. Can these two excel or go extinct again? Today on Goji Center, we'll study these Carnotaurs in detail, studying their anatomies, behaviors, and combat prowess to determine if they have the chance to make it out alive or perish. First off, let's establish some info about what it is we are about to unleash. Believe it or not, what you saw in the film as the main antagonists were actually going to look very different. But there's a reason they look like this, and this massive. So earlier concepts for the movie that morphed into Disney's 2000 film Dinosaur had been brewing for many years before production and had some connective tissue as far as the 1980s with Jurassic Park's Phil Tippett making the short film Prehistoric Beast.
I hope you're familiar with that guy. That's the guy who made Prehistoric Beasts and that dinosaur documentary with the claymation. Yeah, I actually did watch that a while ago, if I'm gonna be frank, but yeah, he's done some great work over the years.
Drafts of the movie Dinosaur had Tyrannosaurus Rex as the big, scary antagonist. However, since there were already 2 successful Jurassic Park films featuring T-Rex, and another one literally about to be released a year after, some changes had to be made to set this one apart. So, in response, Carnotaurus was brought up as a promising alternative. But there was a problem. The real-life species, Carnotaurus sastre, was actually a lightweight speedster compared to other large theropods.
Yeah, it's a cute little guy.
5-ton iguanodon protagonist. The final product was an amped-up gestalt of the real-life Carnotaurus and Tyrannosaurus. So,
hold on, I gotta rewind back to that tail. I never really
Carnotaurus and
Yeah, look at that. Look at that tail. It looks armor-plated. I mean, I know it used it for quite a while, but that thing looks like it could do some serious damage. It almost looks like it could come off or grow back or something.
Tyrannosaurus. So, the creatures we saw terrorizing the film and Animal Kingdom theme park attraction was a fictional species.
Yep.
A juggernaut of a meat-eating bull far larger than its real-life cousin, Carnotaurus robustus. And
that's a good name for it.
Characters in the movie reference them typically as coming from the south, and the debatably canon theme park attraction, Countdown to Extinction, tells us exactly where. The Looney Land, the crazy place, where only the most insane humans, like some of our very own staff, and truly bizarre beasts
Florida?
Home. The land where you can't go a week without some kind of crazy newspaper headline. Florida.
Yep,
yes,
Florida.
Indeed. The full name for this species, given by the faux skeleton on display at Animal Kingdom, is Carnotaurus robustus floridana. Now, this isn't necessarily canonical to the films, especially in light of Florida being predominantly underwater in our own Mesozoic. Debatable. But today, we'll think of it as having our saurian equivalent of Florida Man on steroids being turned loose on the island of St. Hubert. We're just
it definitely is a creature on steroids.
Into the analysis platform. Study them for a bit before we unleash them to the island. At least 2 Carnotaurus became living nightmares for the mass herd of migrating herbivores, so in
I'd say 1.5.
Both of them. The sheer terror they could inflict was
anyway.
Everything from well-armored ankylosaurs, herds of formidable ceratopsians, to the most jacked iguanodon in the film were utterly terrified of the duo. Comparing the 2 on screen with each other, it does become clear one of them is no...
If I'm gonna be honest, hang on, I'm trying to remember the name. Bruton! Yeah, those are the names. I thought they were some species of Mutaborosaurus, if I'm gonna be honest. They looked almost nothing like the iguanodons. But I guess it's designer choice, I suppose?
Noticeably smaller, even if this fella is still quite enormous. Figuring exactly how big they're supposed to be is tricky. The problem with CGI creatures morphing in size from one shot to the other is also present in this film, like in Jurassic World, though thankfully not as extreme as in Rebirth. There was some tie-in merch and DVD extras listing a potential size for the species. The pose is a bit difficult to use because it's not...
Hang on, 23 feet tall. Sheesh. I'd say at least a good 15 feet at the hip.
A flat horizontal shot of the whole body, like what is used in most size charts. And this size chart doesn't specify which Carno from the movie we are looking at. So, we had to bust out the measuring tapes for this one. And it's still a bit confusing. There's a lot of information, theories, and opinions circling the web about who was who in the finale. So, this Carno in the beginning of the film is said to be the one at the end. Or it could be a completely different one. That is because in other deleted scenes, there were actually 3 Carnos. And the book implies that there could have been other Carnos apart from the 2 that were in this cave.
I mean, to be fair, there's a whole world out there, so it's possible there's more than just the 2.
It's a whole mess. So stick with us because getting a good reliable size for these theropods is important in determining how they're going to fare in St. Hubert. It's a widespread belief that the carnotaurs seen in this scene and in the intro were the same ones. However, some of these shots are not lining up. Pachyrhinosaurus, according to the official merch, was stated to be 10 feet at the frill. Aladar, 15 at the top of the head. Here, the Carno towers over the Pachy at possibly around 25 feet. And that's not even accounting for the Carno being further away from the camera, meaning that it could have been a bit taller. This one at the end of the movie seems to be smaller, one who allegedly was the big one, making us initially believe that this fella was the smaller of the 2 that survived the cave collapse in the movie.
I mean, counter argument, you have to remember if you were looking at the pose earlier, I mean, it's 25 feet tall at the head, and if you look a little bit closer to that pose again, let's see here. Alright. Right here, yeah. Yeah, see, the head's about right. Head's actually right about here. So I would give the hips about good 15 feet tall as well. But I think it would mean if the head was right here raised, that would be it. But yeah, I think it still adds up, relatively speaking.
Any tie-in media, film, or novel that this guy was the big one, we're left with some ambiguity. So, what we're going to do is use the Carnotaurus size seen in the beginning of the film and slap it with the label of Big Carno, despite this not being 100% confirmed, and we'll just name it Diablo. Then use these
that's
to figure out the size
an
of
easy
the
name.
Rojo. Using analysis of an accurate 3D reconstruction and reference
Diablo and Rojo.
Using this shot, we get an approximate measurement of 5.5 meters tall at the hip, 6.3 at the top of the head, and nearly 15 meters long. Using volumetrics, this animal at this scale could be anywhere from 16 to a whopping 22 tons. This absolute behemoth is approaching sauropod levels of size. Working our way down to the
that is a scary thing to be running around. And surprisingly fast!
And total length at around 11.2 meters. Weight-wise, we could be looking at an animal that weighs 9 to 10 tons. Very similar to the estimated weights of some adult T-Rex specimens. After all, a skeleton presented at the attraction in the animal kingdom did use a big Tyrannosaurus Rex for a large chunk of the body with scaled-up Carnotaurus parts to match. Smaller Carno, aka Rojo. Height 4.2 meters at the hip, 4.8 meters at the head, length 11.2 meters, mass 9 to 10 tons. Big Carno, aka Diablo. Height 5.5 meters, 6.3 at the head, 14.6 meters long, weighing at 20 plus tons.
Disney, you better not sue these people. You had every chance to bring this franchise back, this movie back. You completely ignored it for over 20 years, so this is fair game here. Let the fans really do the work.
But it's not just the size of these bruisers that is impressive. While they are noticeably slower than the real-life Carnotaurus on account of sheer mass, they do still have those proportionally long legs and the robust tail seen in the real thing to put them to use. A 2011 study by W. Scott Persons IV and Philip J. Curie showed that those thick tails and well-developed leg bones of the real-life Carno were well designed for both high-speed running and maintaining a great sense of balance. The giant movie versions showed off similar skills even with all the weight slowing them down, chasing down prey in a sprint, and navigating steep inclines when climbing without the use of any forelimbs. They may not be as swift as their smaller kin, but they could definitely book it when they need to. Now, if these two are going to make it anywhere past the first big theropod thrown at them, they need to be able to bite back. Can they?
With giant teeth.
Of course! It just so happens that these jaws appear to be a rough halfway point between the real-life Carnotaurus and Tyrannosaurus rex. So Carnotaurus and other abelisaurs had a very specific kind of jaw anatomy that was built to snap down quickly but also open very wide, while still having a good bite force of their own. T-Rex, meanwhile, had jaws to crunch and continue to apply pressure while getting a good grip. The Florida freaks are thus able to both crunch down hard enough to inflict nasty wounds, even on reasonably large targets with a single well-placed bite. They may not be able to snap as fast as the real-life Carno or crunch as hard as a T-Rex, but if there were a set of jaws that were a jack of all trades, then it would be these. How much force? Let's just say enough to kill almost anything on St. Hubert. Using a formula devised by Dr. Sakamoto and co., we can determine these bruisers had a possible crunching force of 35,000 to 45,000 newtons for Rojo and 53 to 70,000 newtons for Diablo.
Yikes!
These are conservative numbers. Really, they could maybe be higher. A big misconception about bites in regards to combat, especially amongst big theropods, is that whoever has the strongest bite always wins. While there is a lot of weight behind this statement, would you believe that a ridiculously overpowered bite force isn't always a good indicator of who wins a fight? Sometimes even a fraction of max bite force can kill a rival. A lot of it comes down to who can bite first and land hits on target, more so than who bites harder, as we're going to find out soon. For additional assets, and ones that might be very useful here, are the robust heads and huge horns. 2018
I mean, yeah, let's see. Armor-plated tail, deadly horns, and a bite.
Beyond just biting. When competing against
deadlier than the real thing.
They might have been using these noggins in flank bashing and head-to-head shoving contests. The species is also heavily armored, more so than most predators. The belly isn't as reinforced, but the thick feature scales embedded across the sides and back can help deflect bites and claws. These plates could also be underneath the skin where you can't see them, making these two a lot more armored than they might seem at first. A perk of having all these spikes means that the tail is now sharp and serrated, adding even more force and damage when it's swung like a club, with enough strength to knock a multi-ton iguanodon around with a head thrash or swipe. Now, it's understandable it took a cave-in pounding involving hundreds of tons of rock falling down to kill one and a plummet off of a cliff from unstable ground to take out the other. These two were
you're no regular dinosaur's gonna take those two out.
To the shores of St. Hubert. Once our newly hired Dino Wrangler and channel member gets a hold of his bearings and
right. Wait,
there's a new job opening, folks, and here's how to enter. Coming out, the Carno duo enters St. Hubert. Right off the bat, as soon as they step foot on the shores of St. Hubert, the colossal Carnos might just find themselves up against the most dangerous carnivorous force on the island. Something that might have felled almost any other
Spinosaurs!
migrating to the region. Spinosaurus, height 4 meters, length 12 meters, quantity.
Oh, we're using the new version, not the Sorna?
Of Spinos that patrol the ocean and the shores are certainly more aquatic than their prototype seen on Sorna, but they are still amphibious and capable of getting on land. Whether the Spinos are as aggressive towards other predators as their predecessor was remains to be seen. They did get along just fine with the local Mosasaurus, and they don't seem to be going out of their way to bully the T-Rex, but they still might be very territorial about the sudden arrival survival of two other massive predators on their beach. If a lone Carnotaurus robustus decided to stand and fight if a confrontation got physical, the journey into the island might stop
Well, if I'm gonna be honest, it's...
Even with size on their side, if this was Diablo in a 4v1, that might be too much even for the Juggernaut. Especially if the Spinos managed to push the battle into much deeper water. Enough for the Moza to take part and finish the deal. Now, these guys
okay, that's how you do it.
Dinosaurs that excelled in forests and deserts, and would be out of their element in the water. But in this scenario, we have two of them present, and even the mighty sailbacks would have to think twice if they try to bully two big ones. Even Rojo, the smallest of the two, would likely still be heavier than any of them, and Diablo would be punching
and more aggressive.
Spino's weight class. In this early game stage, the Carno needs to settle. The Spino's food source is likely out in the water and shore rivers for fresh drinking water and shelter. Not quite the environment that Carnotaurus thrives in.
Those are desert predators.
Annihilation of either squad. At most, a very injured Spino and the other three retreating, and the Carnos heading inland where they would normally thrive anyways. Their needs are very unalike, so any future confrontation would likely not happen due to them partaking in two different predatory niches. The Carnotaurs continue inland where meat is more abundant. Moving for the spaces where the foliage has been beaten back by large herbivores, the duo runs into its very first and plentiful source of food, Titanosaurus, height 15.7
That's gonna be a turkey challenge.
Now, if the so-called genius expert a certain pharmaceutical company hired as a guide was correct, and these stupendous sauropods are merely 11 tons, all the pair need to do...
I'd say 1,100 tons. Have you not seen the size of those things? Universal, what kind of measurements are you using here? I mean, 11 tons? At 110 feet long? What are you doing? Do your measurements right, man!
...who is run straight at them and bowl them over like a giant Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade balloon. Okay, in more seriousness, the sauropods we see on screen are much more akin to the colossal Argentinosaurus. A few shots make it where these things could look some kaiju in the eye, but going off the official listings of height and length, they would be more realistically around 130 tons. Now,
yeah, exactly!
Absolute jobbers like the long necks are 90% of the time in this franchise, this would be an obstacle for even these horrendous hornheads. A full-grown adult could easily bruise or break parts of their bodies with a neck or tail,
or slice them in half with that tail.
Pancake. But Carnotaurus in the real world did have the equipment to dispatch big game, and the ferocious Floridians aren't lacking in that department either. And most importantly, the duo aren't recklessly stupid. They would be aware how dangerous an adult sauropod can be and wouldn't just blindly attack. With how many Titanosaurs there are, and how few big predators there are to cut down their numbers, there is bound to be some juveniles, injured, or sick individuals to be priority targets. And considering an apparently miraculously time-traveling Brachiosaurus in their own movie was fearful of the species, they may not be unaccustomed to hunting sauropods, so they would know to go for the weaker members of the herd and attack after dark when they have the advantage of night vision. With repeated hit-and-run attacks at night, as well as the two of them working together, they might well be capable of felling this kind of big game better than most carnivores on the island. Only the healthier adults would be too much for them. In truth, the two's journey might just stop here. They would have little other reason to keep traveling unless hurt by one of the adult Titanosaurs, or just exploring to check out new territories. They might wind up carving a niche completely to themselves with very little competition given how massive the herds are. But just for the sake of it, let's say they did travel across more of the island or took an alternative route to get to the Titanosaur grounds, such as the...
But then, would they be competing against the Tyrannosaurs? I mean, that's the real question. What would the T-Rex be eating? Because we know that there are trikes and stegos. I think they're, now that I think about it, maybe the Carnotaurs would be specializing on the sauropods while the Rex goes for the armor-plated game. Bit of a compromising coexistence. Unless one decides to have a munchies on someone else's meals. A matchup between Carno and T-Rex would definitely be an interesting one.
The forested highlands. The denser forests neighboring the highlands of the island wouldn't exactly be the ideal territory, and the Carnotaurus duo would probably go in just to pass through. The denser timbers would restrict their movements, and there doesn't seem to be much big game here that would be enticing to them.
I mean, they could be resting in the trees.
From above and from the shrubs. Velociraptor, height 1.6 meters, length 3.9 meters. Mutadon, 1.8 to 2.1 meters tall, 4.8 meters long. And the big pterosaur, Quetzalcoatlus, height 4.
That is... Yeah, can I just go and appreciate how great this version of the Quetzal is? I mean, the other one was cool and all, being the size of a B-17 bomber. But this, it's more accurately sized, and I love what they did with the beak. It's not perfectly accurate, but it's still cool. It's a very scary looking weapon I wouldn't want to get stabbed by. Hope things are going well. Hello, Nick! It's been a while. Welcome back to the stream. How are you enjoying Spooky Night? Anyway, yeah, we're looking at Goji Center once again and checking out the Quetzal. 'Cause we got Disney Carnos here.
0.9 meters, 11.9 meter wingspan. Raptor pairs, Mutadon gangs, and Quetzalcoatlus soaring above might all be noticed, but they wouldn't be much of a threat.
No, they wouldn't.
Have more gumption than common sense. Attacking even just one Carnotaurus alone would likely be suicidal, even with the advantage of cover.
Unless they're a mated pair. I don't know if they're brothers, sisters, but if it's a mated pair, that could be an entirely different species on the rise if survival rates are high enough. Then that would be where the smaller predators would come in to cut down numbers.
These two have armored hides that would deflect most of the damage any claws or beaks could do. It would take weapons from a much higher weight class to do damage to them. By contrast, just a simple head bash, tail swipe, or snap from the Carnotaurus would be debilitating, if not outright lethal to any of these predators.
I'd say it's full. Oh, yep, straight up lethal.
They would take a hit eventually.
I mean, if the beak gets hit right in the right spot, it could be deadly. Or, I mean, it could cost an injury. But, yeah, you're right, Goji. This small game wouldn't even try to take on a Carno.
Outside of mobbing the pair
Too tough
to encourage them to leave, there's not much anything the local predators can do. Still, with the unfavorable terrain and lack of game, the horned horrors have no reason to stay there. Heading for the marshes and riverways, however, might just change both of those variables. The Central River cutting through parts of the island would be much more agreeable terrain to travel through, and potentially appealing prey can be found. Big herbivores such as Parasaurolophus, Ankylosaurus, and perhaps some ceratopsians could be found here.
This is where the Rex is.
Carno bros working together. Right. So, statements have been circling around about these two being a pair of mates. So we did some digging and found that in the novelization, both Carnotaurs are referred to with male pronouns. Whether they were siblings or just hunting buddies, that's...
Okay, yeah. Thanks for addressing that. I was actually wondering if it was a mated pair, but I guess we can forget about the new species theory.
Still unconfirmed. And if there was any doubt that the first Carno seen in the film wasn't male, the CGI production team referred to it also with male pronouns. Back to what we were saying, since these two are working as a team equipped with the best weapons available, even the best armored herbivores might find themselves outclassed by an exceptionally large pair of quick and nimble megatheropods. But not all meat is retrieved by killing.
And surprisingly durable.
Sometimes all it takes is running into a carcass where all the hard work has already been done for you. In this scenario, Rojo picks up the scent of a carcass along the river. As he approaches, his booming footsteps
there it is.
Their first real challenge. Ember, Tyrannosaurus Rex, 4.6 meters tall, 12.5 meters in length. Possibly one of the biggest and most powerful Tyrannosaurus seen yet in the franchise, this Goliath nicknamed Ember would be capable of standing up to the Carnotaurus on land with even terms better than the Spinosaurus could. Size-wise, Ember is either slightly larger or about the same size as Rojo. Unless either of the two could ambush the other in their element, the Carnotaurus being quicker on land, but Ember being more adept in the water, this would be a pretty close contest.
And you know, it's actually hilarious seeing, considering that no one would have expected a T-Rex of all creatures to actually be good in water. That's, you know, after remembering that Hell Creek actually used to be a wetland, I actually wonder if Tyrannosaurs were actually kind of like hippos. This is the ultimate question. Dry killer or wet killer? Which is more deadly?
Ember is just as aggressive as Rexy and pushes for a fight. They might soon find themselves in the fight of their life against a rival predator that could easily be just as lethal to them as the other way around. Both of their species have survived some horrific abuse, and without plot armor warping physics, either of these two are on such equal footing it would turn into a slugfest. The commotion of splashing water
but
and
then,
moving trees
what about
would be
Diablo?
hard to miss by any nearby dinosaur. And in the event that the slightly less heavy Rojo gets into trouble, Diablo enters the arena.
There it is.
That's right, folks. Big Carno has entered the chat, and things don't look good for Ember, who now has another 20 tons stacked against him.
Oh boy.
Ember is a Tyrannosaurus, and if a Tyrannosaurus is anything in this franchise, they are scrappy and will stand their ground if they have to, even against larger opponents. But
that's
outside of
true.
ideal
They are
just
tough.
Isn't a fight Ember could easily win if they went up against Diablo, and they flat out couldn't win if it was a 2v1. The best option would be a standoff, and then the Tyrannosaur retreating into the deeper waters while putting up as much as they can to discourage being attacked. If a fight did break out, Ember would absolutely go out swinging.
But what if there was another Tyrannosaur that's even bigger? We know Tyrannosaurs can be social at times, mated pairs and other than that. If you remember in Dominion, there were as many as 3 Tyrannosaurs all in one area. And they were not exactly killing each other. So there could be a social group of Tyrannosaurs.
But crazy Floridians are used to messing with big reptiles in swamps. Numbers and pounds win the day, and T-Rex is presented with a choice. Live to hunt another day, or die. Things seem favorable so far in St. Hubert for Rojo and Diablo. However, if the Carno tag team continued traveling across the island, it would be perhaps inevitable that they would stumble across the ruins of the humans that warped this island.
Oh yes, here we go.
The colossal carnivore that drove them out.
Yeah, the Distortus.
The Carnotaurus have never encountered anything like human structures before. The sight and smell of them might be uncanny enough to keep them away out of sheer confusion. But if they did inevitably wander into the open ground of the old laboratories and worker villages, it would also be inevitable that they would run into the apex of the island. Distortus Rex, height 8.1 meters, length 14.5 meters. Considering the high level of aggression and potentially violent curiosity Distortus has upon seeing
and the large arms,
confrontation would certainly break out. Only, unlike any other matchup against any other big carnivore in the franchise, this would be a clash where the Distortus would find itself up against another meat eater virtually in the same weight class and then some. A collision course of titans might shake the island if Diablo and Distortus charged into one another and came to blows. The ferocious Floridian definitely has the speed and agility advantage, with a potentially more armored hide and a bite more adept at slicing. The deformed king has a keen advantage in dexterity and grappling ability, with a bite more oriented at crushing. The shredding chomp of the Carno would be ideal.
Yep, I said those arms are going to be a factor.
Lightly armored Distortus, whereas the crushing bite of the Distortus would be able to cause
I forgot about the tiny arms. Yeah. Actually, you know what? I can ignore those tiny little things. I mean, what? I mean, they're not gonna really do much. They're tiny. They're barely even gonna tickle the armor.
damage even through that thick armor of its opponent. A full body charge by Diablo might be enough to topple even the Distortus at the risk of getting grappled. Meanwhile, the Distortus might have the strength to capitalize off that grapple, but wrestling an opponent of equal weight might unbalance the misshapen Goliath. This fight could potentially go either way, and might also be a face-off worthy of a video as well. But having Rojo there to tilt the odds, the chances swing back into Diablo's favor. With a smaller tag team partner, Diablo can land large body blows or take time to aim more critical bites, whereas Rojo can distract and damage the Distortus if it manages to topple.
Deadliest duo in Dino history.
If the fight came to blows, it would be a ferocious altercation, and the Carnotaurs might lose a member, bringing down the beastly behemoth if they're not careful. But if any predators could pull it off, they could. More likely than not, however, even the Distortus might decide this fight is not worth it, and avoid escalating the battle past the initial skirmish. With the power and teamwork to go the distance even against rivals like these, the gruesome twosome from the Sunshine State have what it takes to survive this monstrous island. And if they play their cards right, the nightmares of a bygone era might find themselves the new lords of a modern domain. And if you want to see some of this crazy Florida dino up close and personal, be sure to check out Animal Kingdom's Countdown to Extinction ride as soon as you can. Theme park renovations will be happening soon, and this attraction with its iconic museum, statues, and ride is going to be replaced. It seems like the countdown to
It's gonna be replaced? By what?
Extinction is finally going to be hitting zero soon. And while you're waiting in line to be terrorized by Dinosaur Florida Man, be sure to subscribe and check out more on the channel, because we haven't seen the last of these cantankerous carnivores here yet. They might have survived St. Hubert, but other challenges from other possibly even more nightmarish islands still await.
Like Isa Sorna.